Hello, guys, this is your friend, and we are back with a new fanic. And if you enjoy this fanic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanic like this. And now let's start the fanic.
It was late in the evening, the stars are out, the moon was full, and this was a good night for people to get together. But for a young 5-year-old boy, this was one of the nights that he wishes he would be hiding from such a night. The boy who was wishing to hide tonight was Naruto, the Jinchuriki of Kyubi no Yoko. He is, currently, wearing shorts, a white t-shirt with a orange Uzumaki symbol on the front and shinobi sandals. Unfortunately, unlike many others' children, Naruto was malnourished since he barely has anything to eat, except from what he finds in the garbage or when the only nice people to him were the ramen chief and his daughter at Ichiraku Ramen. He was running for his life since right behind him was a group of angry villagers, some of which were shinobis. As he was running, Naruto could hear the people screaming at him, "We'll get you, demon. And, you'll pay for what you did." He ran towards the village gates, where he hoped that the shinobi guards were there to help him out since they were one of the few people that actually didn't give him the evil glare. Unfortunately, they weren't there, no one was at the gate post for the moment, so Naruto kept running out of the village, where the mob still chased after him. Through the forest, while waving and weaving past trees and bushes, Naruto was trying to shake the angry, bloodthirsty mob behind him. As he ran, he suddenly tripped, where he fell from a hill, covered in thick trees and bushes. He collided with the trees and bushes, giving him a few bruises and cuts from the fall. Naruto fell near an edge where it was near a fast-moving river where rapids were located. Normally the river moved so calmly that it looked like a clear calm lake, but it moves fast when a thunderstorm was fast approaching, where Naruto looked up to see the dark clouds starting to form and high winds were increasing. Naruto tried to get up, but he found that his foot aches too much. He figured that he must have twisted it. Even though his foot was giving him so much pain, Naruto forced himself up on his feet to continue to run. As he walked, he hoped that the third Hokage would arrive soon, since he is the only other person that Naruto trusts since the third always tried to look out for him. Unfortunately, the third Hokage was away from the village at the moment. He was currently in Suna, talking over with the current peace treaty that Konoha and Suna have. Naruto traveled for a bit, hoping he got away from the mob, but that wasn't the case. Naruto turned around to see several people of the mob. Once they spotted Naruto, they quickly called everyone else. Naruto tried to get away, but was caught by one of the people. Once he was caught, he tried to get away, but mob had him completely pinned to a tree, which they all them began to beat him badly. For almost 15 minutes, Naruto was beaten and cut very badly, near to the point of death. As he laid on the ground, with bruises and blood coming out from him, the leader of the mob grabbed what was left of his now torn shirt and held him above the rapid-moving river. For the Yondaime Hokage, the leader of the mob yelled out, which the rest of the people also shout out. He tossed Naruto into the river, which Naruto fell into the fast-moving water that quickly rushed him down whatever place it led. The villagers watched with amusement and joy, knowing that they avenged the people that they lost from the Kyubi as well as avenging the fourth Hokage just as the thunderstorm started to rain. They then left in a hurry, since they don't want to be caught by the third Hokage's more loyal guards from what they just done. As they walked back home, with joy and happiness in their hearts, they have no idea what turn of events they just unleashed into the world. Fire Country Border. At the west of the Fire Country, near its border, a group of Kumo-nin were quickly on their way back home from a mission. It was early evening and they were right now trying to find a good place to camp for the night so they can get a fresh start tomorrow morning and be back home by noon. As they continue to look for a good spot, the leader of the four-man team was Darui, a young newly appointed Jonin. He had white fuzzy spike hair around his head, while having some of it cover up his left eye. He had dark skin, wearing his own Junin-style uniform. They continued to move forward until one of Darui's teammates pointed out a waterfall. The waterfall was tall, about 3 stories high. The teammate pointed to a cave, which looked big enough for everyone to share, which was a good thing since they can see a powerful thunderstorm coming their way. Once they checked the cave out, they all went in to get themselves ready for some sleep. Darui was the last one to go in. But just before he went in, he looked at the waterfall to make sure that any water won't come inside the cave. It was then that he notices something. Right before him, a body of a young child came falling down the waterfall, falling towards the rocky bottom that would surely kill him. Darui quickly ran and jumped at the young child. Darui caught the boy at the last second, before the young child hit the rapids. Once he caught him, he checked him out only to see blood on his hands. He checked closely to see that it was a young boy with spiky blonde hair. The boy was covered in bruises, cuts, blood, and his body almost frozen, but Darui could feel a small heartbeat and a faint pulse. He quickly went back to his team. Inside, his team had already gotten a nice warm fire, when they saw Darui coming inside very quickly. He got his good friend, C, to help. C was young Chunin, a mid-teen. C looked to see that Darui was holding onto a very injured boy. Darui explained that he just caught the boy from hitting the rapids. Darui ordered him to try and save him, which C agreed since he was a training medic nin, so the boy's life was on his hands. Darui watched, along with his other two teammates, as C did everything on helping the blonde hair boy. C took off the boy's clothing, and laid him down, near the fire to help warm him up. He then used medical jutsu to cure him of his injuries. After about a half hour of waiting, C finished all the basic things he could do for the young boy, which he turned to Darui. "Well, is he going to be alright?" asked Darui. "I did everything I could to help him. The only problem now is that he has developed hyperthermia, most likely from staying inside the freezing water as well as the injuries. The only thing we can do now is keep his body warm and hope for the best. The rest is up to him," answered C. Darui just looked at the boy and could feel that he is someone special just by looking at him, as well as seeing on how he was still alive from coming down the waterfall with all the bruises and injuries he had. His thoughts were broken when C continued to talk. "Darui, there is something you should see." Darui saw C put some charca on the boy's stomach. They were both seeing a seal appear in front of them, which they were amazed on how on what Darui had saved. They guessed that this boy is actually a Jinchuriki, but didn't know which one. Darui decided to bring him back to Kumo since he believed that the Raikage would know what to do next. Morning. It was sunrise, when Darui and his team started to wake up. It was a rough night for Darui since he had to think about what he was going to say to the Raikage on how he and his team had somehow found a possible Jinchuriki. But of course, before he even thought about that, he had to see if the boy even lived since he was in a dead-like state from last night. C also woke up after having some rest and to check to see if the boy lived. Everyone in Darui's team woke up, which Darui and C went to check on the boy that was lying near them. C checked to see if the boy had survived the night or not. C checked and smiled to see that he lived. He then told Darui that the boy would live and that he is healing pretty nicely and quickly. Darui was glad about that, but he heard C that it will still be another day before the boy can be well enough to wake up. Darui acknowledged this, which he then said that they would take the boy back to Kumo, and see what the Raikage would do with him. Once they packed up, C took the blonde boy and placed him on his shoulders, which they then all left to Kumo at full speed. Konoha. It was morning when the third and his loyal Anbu squad came back to Konoha from his meeting with the Kazekage in Suna. As he walks towards the Hokage Tower, he decided to visit Naruto since he wanted to make sure that he was still safe since he wasn't here for the week. He made his way towards Naruto's apartment, which on the way he told his Anbu squad to go and get some rest and send another squad with him. They acknowledge it, which they shunshin away to the Anbu headquarters. The third made it to Naruto's apartment building, which he walked up the stairs. Once he made it, he spotted the graffiti door on Naruto's apartment, which he could only sigh in sadness on seeing an innocent boy live like this. As he looked on, he couldn't help but remember on what his predecessor, the Yondaime Hokage, think on what they were doing to Naruto, as Naruto was the fourth only living son. He knocked on the door to see if Naruto was awake. He waited a few moments to only not get a response, which he then knocked again. He was getting worried since he has waited for more than 5 minutes. He decided to go in to check if Naruto was alright. Inside, the third looked around to see that Naruto wasn't inside his apartment, which he then checked to see Naruto's bed was unmade and looked unused since last time. He was really starting to get worried, which he then sensed the new Anbu team coming towards him. He quickly went outside to meet his Anbu squad that had just arrived. Anbu, quickly, I want you to go and check every square inch of Konoha. Find Naruto Uzumaki now. Once you located him, come back to my office with him, understand? Ordered the third. The Anbu nodded and went to find Naruto. The third quickly went to the Hokage Tower to wait to and hear about Naruto being found. As he walked towards the Hokage Tower, he couldn't help but blame himself for not taking Naruto with him since he was a lot more safer with him than being in Konoha alone. Plus he could have made friends with one of the Kage's children that seemed to be around the same age as Naruto. Later, it was noon, when the third finally got a report from the Anbu squad that he sent out to find Naruto. Unfortunately, when they arrived, the third didn't see Naruto's with either one of them. He then asked them to investigate on what happened to him earlier in that morning. Now, he was just waiting on what the investigation has found. He was about to go get lunch, when his Anbu came back to give the report on the investigation. He was informed that a mob formed against Naruto, just nearly over yesterday afternoon. Then explained that the people from the mob came back to the village through the main gate, which indicated that Naruto was chased outside the village, but they couldn't find him from the possible trail that they located, only that they found dried blood near a river that they guessed before the storm hit yesterday, that Naruto was thrown into the river, when it was rushing and moving too rapidly for a young boy to stay alive, plus the river was moving too fast that following him would be a waste of time. Judging from what the Anbu found, they said that the possibility that Naruto was dead was likely, since just past the border where the river leads to, a waterfall with jagged rocks in the bottom, Naruto would have fallen into it, possibly killed once on impact. The third had his face down, with sadness, which he then rose with fury unseen in many years. I'm ordering an emergency council meeting of both shinobi and civilian council members. I want a full explanation on all this from them. Get them here, now. Ordered the third. The Anbu acknowledged, which they all left to immediately inform the council members of the meeting. As they left, the third looked at the Yondaime's picture on top of the shelves, along with the Shidaime and Nindaime Hokages. Minato, I'm sorry, I have failed you and your son. Thought the third as he gotten ready to face the council. Konoha council room. Right now, there was a lot of buzz moving in the council chamber room. All the clan heads, along with the civilian representatives, were getting into their seats, while the shinobi elders, Homura, Kaharu, and Danzo, took their seats next to the Hokage. It was only after the council calmed down when the third came into the room. As he entered, everyone could see and feel the killing intent that he was letting off. Once he took his seat, the council members stayed silent for a bit. After a few moments, Homura broke the silence and asked the third on why he called this meeting since he wanted answers on why the third had called for an emergency meeting. Homura, I'm more interested on why you, or a matter fact, you, Kaharu, and Danzo have yet realized on what has happened. Said the third. Homura, Kaharu and Danzo were confused, since they were wondering on what has happened. It was then, the third explained on what he meant. Early this morning, I went to check on a specific person, only to find out that he has been missing since yesterday afternoon. Stated the third. The elder and clan heads were wondering on what he meant, but a few of the civilian council members knew since they started to act nervously, which the third saw and now knew who was responsible, or at least knows who were involved. Who do you mean, Sarutobi? Asked Kaharu. I'm talking about Naruto Uzumaki. That's who I'm talking about. This got the heads and the elders a stunned look, which the third explained. I have just gotten a report from my Anbu after I check on him early this morning. It appears that Naruto has been missing since yesterday afternoon, before a violent storm hit. The clan's heads and elders were upset now. The clan heads knows that Naruto isn't the Kyuubi, so they honor the wish of the fourth Hokage, but still didn't do much of anything nice, except the Hyuga or Uchiha who rejected the boy and avoided him. The elders knew that with Naruto gone, Konoha has lost the Kyuubi no Yoko, which was an important military weapon for them. This was especially the case for Danzo, since he was hoping to turn the boy into his own personal weapon that would only listen to him, which he tried to get the third to hand him over to him for the past couple of years. It was then that Danzo spoke up. Impossible, for the week that you were gone, I had sent, much to my own request, a few extra shinobi to keep an eye on the boy. I find it impossible for him to be missing. The third looked at Danzo, who even though they sometimes don't agree on things, they do know how important Naruto is. For the third, it was keeping the fourth Hokage, legacy and heir of the Namikaze Uzumaki clan safe, while Danzo saw Naruto as nothing more as his weapon. It appears that somehow, the mob that my Anbu had told me about was able to strike on him, which they then threw him towards his death at the river that was closely located to our village. Answered the third. It was then, Sum, clan head of the Inuzuka, spoke up, then we need to search for the boy immediately. He may have survived the water and could still be alive, but barely. Yes, I know, unfortunately, since yesterday's storm, the river was moving too rapidly for any young child to actually survive. And even if he did manage to stay afloat on the river, you must remember that there is a waterfall, which would certainly end anyone's life, especially when he was beaten towards an inch of his life. In word the third. Most of the clan heads, except the Uchiha, Aburame, and Hyuga, just lowered their heads since the Yondaime Hokage's legacy was now lost. The other three clans' head didn't show any emotion, but had their own thoughts about it. The civilians were secretly happy about since they don't have to worry about the demon infecting their home and village anymore. Their thoughts were broken when the third spoke up. Sum, even though we know that Naruto not being alive is hard, I would at least like you or any of your clansmen to bring back his body if it can be found. Which Sum nodded in agreement to the third request. With that, he ended the meeting, but assured that for those who were involved in Naruto's death would be punished in the highest degree. Once the clan heads, elders, and civilians left, the third just sighed in sadness cause of what happened. I should have at least told Naruto about his parents. At least then, he would have died knowing the truth and be at peace knowing that they really loved him. Thought the third, since now, he has to plan a funeral for Naruto, and place his corpse or find something of him to secretly place him next to his parents, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. In Kumo, once past the gates to enter the village, Darui and his team made it back home. As they walked, Darui ordered C to take the boy to the hospital and stay with him, while he told his other teammates to go home and rest since he wants to report the mission to the fourth Raikage himself. The reason on why he wants to discuss the mission himself was because he wanted to make sure that the boy they found was legit, and if so, the Raikage would have to think of something about it. Darui's team went to do like his said, which he then made his way to the Raikage's office. Darui walked towards the Raikage's office, which didn't take long. He made his way towards the Raikage's office, where he saw the Raikage's secretary. The secretary was a young female, who looked to be in her early to mid-20s. She had white hair and dark skin, while dressed in a kunyachi dress that kinda looked like a bit of a business suit, where the skirt stopped just above her knees. Hey Mabui, Team Darui has returned from our B-rank mission and is ready to report. Also, I would like to inform the Raikage about a recent development that my team received while coming back home. Said Darui. Very well, Darui-san. I will inform the Raikage about your return and about your mission report as well as the development. Answered Mabui. As Mabui went inside the Raikage's office, Darui waited outside his office. Man, this is such a drab. I finally was able to perfect my speech for the Raikage to hear my report, but now I have to explain to the Reikage about the possibility of us finding another Jinchuriki like Yugito and Bisama. I don't know what he would think. What a drab, thought Darui. Mabui came back after a few minutes, where she told Darui to come in. The Reikage's office was a spacious oval office, where on the opposite side of the double-door entrance, there was a large windows that showed all of Kumo. Between the windows and center of the office, the Reikage sits in a somewhat desk, where on one side had the regular desk version, while on the other connected to it, a sofa where 100-pound dumbbells or more laid near it. On the sofa, seating comfortably, was the Yondaime Reikage, A. He was a tall 6 feet 5 or 7 foot man. He was a very muscular man, those from the Mr. Universe competitions, with blonde hair and dark skin. He wore shinobi pants, with gold bangle bracelets on each of his wrists and shinobi sandals as well. Finally, he wore his Reikage robe and hat. Once Darui came in, the Reikage spoke to him. All right Darui, even though I can read your B-rank mission report on paper, you insisted on speaking with me since you said that your team found a development. Hi Reikage-sama. Before I speak about the development, I would like to explain the mission success. Said Darui. For next 10 minutes, or more, don't know, Darui explained to the Reikage about what had happened on the mission, which the Reikage was pleased to hear. After he let the Reikage digest his mission report, he then began to explain on what his team has stumbled in their arms. Reikage-sama, as we were ready to get some rest for the night in a cave, I was the last to go in, when I decided to check the waterfall to check that water won't pour in the cave. It was then I saw a young boy fall from the top of the waterfall, which I immediately caught. Once I caught him, I saw that he had multiple injuries. I had C to check and help him out. After C finished with him, he showed me something interesting on the boy. Said Darui. The Reikage was interested on learning on what Darui and C found out about the boy. Darui took a moment to breath some air before saying, we both saw a seal on the boy's stomach. It looked to be a very powerful seal. My only assumption is that he is a Jinchuriki. Finished Darui. Both A and Mabui, who was still inside the office, were completely surprised on what Darui. The Reikage immediately asked questions. Darui, are you sure? Asked Reikage. Yes, Al thought I'm not sure of it myself, that is why we brought him here and get your opinion Reikage-sama. Answered Darui. Where did you say you found the boy? Asked A. Darui asked for a map of the terrain west near the border of Hai no Kuni. Darui pointed on the map, where the waterfall was located, which both Reikage and Mabui looked at. It was then Mabui spoke up. Reikage-sama, that waterfall is connected to a river that moves from east to west. Judging from the river to the west, I say it was near Konoha. With that, a thought about it, which he concluded, I believe that you, Darui, have found Konoha's Kyubi no Jinchuriki. Which surprised Darui. A then asked where the boy is now, which Darui told him that he left him in C's care to take to the hospital and not to leave him alone until he got word from him. A told Mabui that he is leaving the office and she would take care of things here, since he wants to see the boy cause he got a suspicions feeling that he knows who the boy is. If he guessed right, then Kumo had just received the jackpot in possible glory and power. Kumo's hospital. Currently, C was sitting inside a hospital room, waiting for Darui or Reikage's word on him to let him go and rest. As he sat, he looked at the boy on the bed he was seating next to. He was amazed on how fast the boy's healing ability are, but reminded himself that if he is a Jinchuriki, then it wouldn't be unusual for Jinchurikis getting a special power from their Biju. Naruto was resting peacefully in a hospital bed. As he rested, he had no idea what has happened to him. C waited for a couple of more minutes, when he heard knocking at the door. He went and opened the door to see Darui with the Reikage. He bowed to the Reikage, which he led them inside the room. A quickly went to the boy's bedside to see his face clearly. It was then that he smiled since he guessed the possibility that he was right. Well Darui, it seems that you have indeed brought home something interesting. And if I do things right with the boy, unlike what Konoha has done, then we'll have a very powerful shinobi in the making in our ranks. Said A. Both Darui and C were wondering on what the Raikage was planning, but stopped their thoughts when A spoke to again. C. Inform the medic nins here to alert me when the boy wakes up. Also once he wakes up, give something to eat since even I can tell that the boy hasn't eaten anything good for a while. After that you may go and get some rest from your mission, order A. Hi, Raikage-sama, answered C, which he then left the room to inform the medical units. A then turned to Darui and said, now Darui, since you brought him here, I'll have to give and your team a bonus for this. Which Darui smiled. Now go and get some rest, but before you do rest, I want you to inform B and Yugito to visit my office later on in the afternoon. Ordered A. Darui nodded in agreement and left, which was the last to leave. Before he left the room, he looked at the blonde hair boy, while thinking, even though I could just get the QB out of him. It is better if he becomes loyal to us since Konoha has thrown away a prize like no other. I will not let this opportunity pass us by. Plus, I would at least show some respect to my only rival son. After all, he is the only one that surpassed me in speed. A thought about the only person to actually surpass him in speed, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Days later. It was mid-morning and currently, the third Hokage was walking towards the cemetery with some flowers in his hands. These were beautiful flowers, a couple of white lilies to take where all people are resting in peace, Konoha's graveyard. Once he walked inside the graveyard, he peacefully walked toward 3 specific graves that were close together. In front of him, the 3 graves were significant since these 3 are a family in both blood and now spirit. On his left side, it was Konoha's strongest Hokage and hero in the Third Great Shinobi War, Minato Namikaze the Yondaime Hokage. Next to it, it was an unmarked grave, which he mentally noted that it needed to be marked later on. The grave had no name since it was a person that no one knew much except for her good friends. The grave had only the Uzumaki symbol. The third knew that this grave was Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's mother and the 4th Hokage's secret wife. Next to these graves, was their greatest treasure, the treasure that they sacrifice everything including their own lives, their only son, Naruto Uzumaki. The only thing is that it was unmarked except with the Uzumaki symbol, since he wanted no one to desecrate it cause of their past grudge against the Kyuubi. He wanted Naruto's grave to be at peace since he wanted these 3 people to be at peace together as a family here in death and at the afterlife. The third placed the white lily flowers on each one of their graves so they know that they will never be forgotten by those that care about them. As he places the flowers, he could only wish that Naruto's body was here except it wasn't. After a few days of searching, Sumi's tracking team followed the river to try and find Naruto, but there wasn't any sign of him. Once he had gotten the report, the third decided to just bury the things that were of him so at least they know that his spirit was at peace. Once he finished his prayers, he left to go back to the Hokage Tower since unlike the dead, he still needed to do his work for the village. As the third made it to the tower, he steadily walked towards his office. As he climbed up the tower, he figured that now would be the time to send word to Jiraiya about Naruto since Jiraiya was the only other person close to Naruto and his family. Once he made to his office, he opened the door to find the elders inside his office, waiting for him. Sarutobi, where were you? Usually at this time, you would be here, stated Kaharu. I went and paid my respects to my predecessor and his family. Got a problem with that? Answered the third. Kaharu didn't speak about since it was true. The elders knew that with Naruto's death, the last known heir to both the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans was now gone from Konoha. Sarutobi, even though respecting the 4th Hokage and his long-lost family as well and all, we must think about the village. More importantly, the village's military power, stated Danzo. Sarutobi listened as Homura, Kaharu and Danzo explained about how their village's strength has just taken a blow with losing their Jinchuriki as well as losing the heir of the Namikaze and Uzumaki. It was then that he heard Danzo had a plan to help the village get back its lost strength, which Sarutobi frowned as he listened to Danzo explained where he can get a new Jinchuriki. Days earlier, it was early evening in Kumo, which a lot of families were getting ready to enjoy dinner, while shinobis prepare to go on mission or whatever. For A, the Raikage, he was getting ready to talk with the village's strongest guardians, his adopted brother B, the Hachibi no Kyugyu and 16-year-old, Yugito ni the Nibi no Bakenako. As awaited, he couldn't help but think on how he would get the boy to join Kumo, but hearing and seeing his condition, he knew that if he pushed the right buttons at him, then Naruto would want to stay here and train to be a powerful shinobi for them. His thoughts were interrupted when his secretary came into his office to inform her that B and Yugito were here. Once they both enter, B was the first to talk. Yo bro, what's up? So what's the beef? Rapped Killer B. Okay, just to give you all fair warning, I at rhyming so. I'll try to make him rhyme, but if Killer B talks like a normal person, don't be discouraged. Aside at his brother's lame attempt to rap or rhyme, while Yugito just frowned in annoyance, but continued to act maturely in front of the Raikage. Took a moment, which both B and Yugito straighten up since they know the look on their leader's face, meant something serious has happened. Darui has returned from his mission earlier today, as you all know. Both nodded, which then continued, but on the way back, Darui and his team had stumbled upon something that virtually landed in their arms. Darui's has brought the Kyubi Jinchuriki from Konoha to Kumo today. As soon as stated the fact, both B and Yugito were surprised to hear that Darui had somehow brought to Kumo another Jinchuriki and the most powerful of Biju along with it. Began to explain to both of them on what happened to the boy once Darui had found him. He explained the wounds, the injuries, everything. For Yugito, it saddened her since a young boy being in such a beaten state was very hard to imagine, but for B, he knows it too well since, unlike Yugshio, he knew what it meant to be a true Jinchuriki since he was given almost the same treat if his brother A wasn't there to help him out. Their thoughts were interrupted when A continued, currently, the boy is in the hospital, being cared for, but considering on how fast he is healing, I say he might wake up, completely healthy tomorrow. So why have you contacted us then, Raikage-sama? Asked Yugito. I plan to see if the boy would join Kumo, but given the state he was in, he'll most likely join since I doubt that he would want to go back to Konoha after what he received. Plus, if I'm right, then Kumo would have the heir of two powerful clans. Answered A. Yugito didn't know on what A meant about the heir of two powerful clans, but she had to agree that the boy would most likely join their village since here, he can get a fresh start and become a normal boy. So bro, what's up with us? Because I don't see a why you asked us here for. Asked B. If I play my cards right, he would want to stay, at which point, I will explain to him on who he is, to make sure that he knows. After that, I play it by ear. What I want you two to do is be his guidance, since if he meets others like him, the likelihood of wanting to stay here would increase since he would probably see you two as role models. Stated A. Both B and Yugito nodded, since what A said was pretty much a good plan. Yugito, even though, doesn't have it as bad as B did when she was young, she can understand that the fact of being alone as a Jinchuriki. If it wasn't for B being her a role model and teacher, she would have never had the courage to continue to move forward and become the kunoichi she was meant to be. B thought the idea was alright, but still didn't like the idea, because he felt that he may be babysitting a 5-year-old. Now, with that explained, A said, breaking the thought that B and Yugito were having, you two are dismissed since now, all we need to do is wait for the kid to wake up. Both B and Yugito left to go home and sleep, while A was also thinking the same thing, but also wondered on how things would turn out. He can only hope that his plan can work. Morning. The sun was high mid-morning, which stores, vendors, shinobi and such at Kumo were getting up for another day. In Kumo's hospital, a young Naruto was starting to wake from his ordeal. As Naruto was starting to wake up, he could feel that he was sleeping in a soft bed. As he rubbed his eyes, he suddenly remembered on what happened to him, the beating, the injuries, the rushing water. He looked at himself, wondering on how he could still be alive. He then looked at his surroundings to see that he was inside a hospital room, but he could tell that it was different somehow. He then heard the wind from the window. He didn't hear any of the trees that were always near the hospital. He knew something must be wrong, but before he could do anything, the door to his room opened. He looked to see a young nurse. "Oh, so you're awake. I'm glad since you had everyone worried here." The nurse smiled, which Naruto can tell that it was real since only the old man, third Hokage, Tsuki and Ayame ever smile like that to him. His thoughts were interrupted, when his stomach growled loudly, which the nurse smiled and laughed a bit. "I can hear that you must be very hungry. Wait right here and I'll go get you something to eat, okay?" said the nurse, which Naruto nodded in agreement. Naruto decided to wait after he got something to eat to move around since he was just too hungry to do anything. As Naruto waited in bed, the nurse quickly went to the nearest medic nin to inform the Raikage that he was awake. After informing the Raikage, the nurse quickly went to get something good for Naruto to eat since she can tell that Naruto hasn't anything proper for a long time now. Naruto waited to see that the nurse came back, with a healthy selection for Naruto's breakfast. The nurse brought Naruto a bowl of mixed fruits, apples, bananas, strawberry, a bowl of cereal and milk, a couple of butter toast with jam, and orange juice. At first, Naruto was a bit hesitant, but the nurse nudges him to eat, while she goes and gets something for him to wear. Once the nurse left, Naruto started to eat the food that she brought. The food was, but to him who hasn't eaten anything so tasty or fresh besides Ichiraku ramen, it was a 4-course meal. He began to eat the meal, which he ate it in less than 10 minutes, since it was the first meal that he has gotten in a long time. Once he was finished, he never felt so good since Ichiraku ramen. But now with finishing the meal, he starts to wonder on what to do next since he is in an unknown place. Just as he was thinking it, someone else walked into the room. It was Darui and C, who came as order from the Raikage. Naruto was a little nervous, since he saw that the headbands weren't Konoha leaf symbols, meaning they were from another village. Before Naruto could begin to worry, they both spoke to him. "Hey kid, how are you feeling? Better, I hope, especially when I caught you before you hit the rocks on the waterfall," stated Darui. Naruto was stunned since he didn't know that he was going to fall into a waterfall. He figured that he must have been so out of it, that he doesn't remember anything else. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when C spoke up. "You really gave us a scare, kid, especially since you were in death's door when we found you." It was then that Naruto spoke up. Thank you then for saving my life." Both Darui and C took Naruto's thank you since even though they could have left him there, they were both kind-hearted and would do that to a kid, especially one so badly hurt. Both Darui and C thoughts were interrupted when Naruto spoke up. So where am I?" asked Naruto. "You are in Kumo. Now we should ask you a question. What's your name and where you're from?" asked Darui. "Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki from Konoha," answered Naruto. "Alright, now that we know your name, we'll introduce you to the Raikage, who is the same as the Hokage in our village later on," said C. Naruto was surprised to hear that he is going to be introducing to someone who is just as important as the old man, who he usually calls the Hokage. Darui then said that he would be introduced to him later, once he has gotten a little stronger. Once they both left, Naruto couldn't help but be happy since this the first time anyone has looked at him, beside the third, Ayame, Tsuki the ramen chief, without glaring or giving him the cold look in their eyes. It's been a whole day since Naruto had talked to Darui and C. During that time, Naruto was thinking about what was going to happen to him. He also thought about how worried the third is, as well as Ayame and Tsuki. Also at that time, he saw a couple of other nurses checking up on him, making sure that he was alright. Naruto had to be honest with himself, thinking on how nice these people are since he didn't see or wasn't given any hostility towards him. Not only were the nurses nice to him, he also got a nice couple of meals, which he couldn't be happier. For lunch, he had fruit, apple and orange slices, peanut butter sandwich, and milk. For dinner, he got an rice and curry with water. All in all, Naruto was able to have a stuffed stomach, which for the first time ever, he had actually gotten to eat so much in one day. After he got in the meals and rest some more, he felt like a new person. The next morning, Darui and C came back and told him that he was going to see the Raikage later today. Naruto was kinda scared since he doesn't know what kind of person the Raikage is. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but wish that the third Hokage was with him for support. Soon after, Darui and C left to give Naruto some more privacy since he was given some new clothes to wear. Once Naruto had changed his hospital gown to his new clothing, shirt, shorts, and shinobi sandals, he walked outside his hospital room to see Darui and C waiting for him. Both of them told Naruto to follow them since they didn't want him to get lost. Outside, Naruto got to see where and what kind of village he was in. He was surprised to see this. All around him, Naruto saw nothing but mountain ranges which he saw housing and other building-like structures built into them. Naruto continued to follow Darui and C, which Darui walked in front. While C walked behind them, he saw all the people walking around, which he noted that their skin was darker than what he normally saw people. He also noted that there wasn't many tree around the village. For a couple of minutes, the three finally made it to Raikage Tower, which Naruto saw that it was built inside the tallest mountain. Once they went inside, Naruto was amazed on how it was built. He saw many shinobi and other personnel walking around the building, actively busy. Darui led Naruto to the stairs where all three walked up to the top floor where the Raikage's office was located. Outside the office, the Raikage's personal secretary was filing some documents when she saw Darui and C coming up the stairs with a young boy with whisker marks on both his cheeks. She realized that it was Naruto, the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko. Darui told Mabui that they were here to see the Raikage, which she went to announce their arrival to him. Naruto was now looking nervous since he was wondering on what the Raikage would be like. He had many thoughts running through his mind, but hoped that the Raikage was like the third Hokage. Naruto's thoughts stopped when Mabui said that they were allowed to enter, which they all went in. Naruto tried not to look nervous, but he couldn't help but be a little intimidated by this moment. Once inside, Naruto looked around to see that the office was circular and had opened windows that could see around the village behind it. His attention was quickly focused as he saw what probably the biggest, muscular person he has ever seen. In front of him, was a tall, from what he can tell as the Raikage was sitting down, dark-skinned man with a large muscular body. He had blonde hair that was combed back and a small mustache and beard. His face was distinguished with pronounced cheekbones and tear troughs under his eye and a prominent crease across his forehead. He wore the traditional robes and hat of a Kage, but with no shirt on, to display his hulky body. He had gold bangle bracelets on each wrist and wore a gold belt around his waist with a boar's face engraved in the center. As Naruto was taking it all in, the Raikage was also looking at Naruto too. Even though Naruto was young, the Raikage saw the similarities to Konoha no Kiryu Senko, Konoha's Yellow Flash, the Yondaime Hokage, mostly of the blonde spiky hair, blue eyes and skin color. But of course, he also saw the similarities of his mother, the former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi, Kushina Uzumaki. When he heard that the boy's name was Naruto Uzumaki, he was able to figure out that he was Kushina's son, but now seeing him in front of him, he knew that the Minato and Kushina had gotten married. Once they met, the Raikage decided to break the ice and play by ear since he doesn't know how much Naruto knows of his past. "Hello young one," said politely. Naruto also greeted the Raikage with respect since he knew that unlike the old man, the way the Raikage hold himself, he knew that he needs to be at his best behavior here. Once they greeted each other, continues to speak. You gave my men quite the scare, especially in the condition that they found you. I hope you thank them for saving your life. Said A. Naruto nodded in agreement, saying that he did thank both Darui and C. It was then that the Raikage decided to ask Naruto a question. Even though I know that they saved you from death, I can't help but wonder something, which got Naruto attention. Why were you inside a raging river in the first place? Asked A. Naruto, of course, knew why he was in the river, but he just doesn't know why the villagers hated him so much and give him beatings. The Raikage asked Naruto on why he was in it, which he told him since it would be bad if he lied to the Raikage. After Naruto finished explaining, the Raikage only had a serious look, while Darui and C had a painful look on their face on what Naruto's been through. The Raikage waited for a bit for the tension that Naruto was going through, as he could see in Naruto's face the look of fear and loneliness. It was then that the Raikage broke the silence. Do you want to know why the people in your village despise you? Naruto eyes widened when he heard that the Raikage knows on why the villagers hate him so much. I'm pretty sure that the old monkey, the third Hokage, has told you about the Kyuubi attacking Konoha. Naruto nodded as he remembered on what the old man told him before. He remembered that 5 years ago, that the Kyuubi came to Konoha and started to destroy everything in its path. Many shinobi and civilians were killed in the process, but it wasn't until the legendary Yondaime Hokage had killed the fox, but it cost him his life in the process. It was then that the Raikage began to fill Naruto with some facts. Now look here, kid. The Kyuubi can't not be killed. In fact, none of the Bijus can't be killed, stated the Raikage, which Naruto was beginning to wonder on what is a Biju, but stopped as the Raikage continued. Instead of killing it, the fourth could only seal it away so it couldn't destroy all of Konoha. He sealed it inside a little baby. Naruto never heard of this, but he wondered if it was true, then why he doesn't know about it, plus what does this story had to do with him? It was then that Naruto heard the Raikage give him some other facts. Listen, Naruto, when did the Kyuubi attack? Question Raikage. October 10th, answered Naruto. What day were you born? The Raikage asked again. October 10th, answered Naruto. Do you see where I'm going? If the Kyuubi attack on the same day you're born, and the fourth could only seal away into a young baby, what do you think happened? Question Raikage. It was then that Naruto began to see the gaps of what he was being told. He can start seeing things more thoroughly, all the beatings, especially the harsh treatment on his birthday, on why everyone calls him demon. Just before he can say it, he heard the Raikage speak up. That's right, the fourth sealed the Kyuubi into you. You are the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko, stated the Raikage. Naruto just had a look of shock and fear since he doesn't know on what to think. Instinct quickly took over, which he first just slowly back away, then just started to run away, like he needed to get away from everyone. Darui, C, and Mabui were about to stop him, but A told them stop. A carefully looked at Naruto expressions before he ran away. Once Naruto ran away, Darui, C, and Mabui looked at the Raikage on why he let Naruto go. Let the boy go for now. He has just been told something that opened his eyes and realized on what he has been lied to, especially one that was never explained to. Let him be alone for now. I already have our Anbu watching the boy so he doesn't go anywhere we don't want him to go or get in trouble. Explained. The others could understand, since for a small child, news this big and heavy must be hard to endure, especially when everyone else knew and you didn't. With Naruto, Naruto ran outside the Raikage mountain, trying to go anywhere to be alone. He ran for about half an hour until he made it to a secluded spot. In that half hour, Naruto he ran towards the other half of the village in Kumo, not even noticing it himself. The Anbu that were keeping an eye on him were amazed on how an ordinary child was able to run so far, in such a short of time. But to their surprise, Naruto ran towards an area where Killer Bee sometimes hangs around. Naruto ran towards an open lake that had a lot of grass terrain, with a few bushes and trees around the area. Naruto just stopped at the edge of the lake, which he then fell on his knees from exhaustion. As he rested and got his breath to catch up to him, he looked at the lake, where the water's reflections showed his face. He looked at the water, which then remembered all the people of Konoha said about it. "Get away, you demon," said one person. "Don't go near him, it's the demon," whispered another. "Hey, it's the freak," another yelled out. Naruto looked at the reflection to see himself, but then from all the comments that Konoha said, he then saw the reflection of Kyuubi as himself. He thought with tears coming out of his eyes, "Is this why everyone in Konoha hate me? Is this why they always beat me? Am I really the KY?" Naruto thoughts were interrupted when he heard someone say, "Hey Squirt, what's with all the huffing and trembling?" Naruto looked behind him, away from the water's reflection while also rubbing the tears of his face, to see a huge person behind him. It was a dark-skinned man with a muscular body, similar to the Raikage. He had a white beard and hair. He had a tattoo on his right shoulder that says, "Iron," and on his left cheek, had a tattoo of a bull's horn. He wore oval-shaped sunglasses and a white-colored forehead protector. He also wore a white-colored one-strap over one shoulder flak jacket of a jonin with a red rope tied around his waist, white handbands, and a white scarf around his neck and carried 7 swords on his back. Before Naruto could say anything, the older man looked at him for a moment before saying, "Oh, so you're the kid who has the 9-0. Huh," Naruto said in confusion. "I said you have 9-0, the Kyuubi no Yoko," stated the older man. How do you know?" surprised Naruto, since he didn't know if everyone in Kumo knows this or not that he is the Kyuubi. "'Cause like you, I have one as well," said the older man. "You have one as well?" surprised Naruto. "Let me introduce meself. I float like a butterfly, and sting like a bee. I Killer Bee, the 8-tail beast, word." Rapped Killer Bee. Killer Bee was actually surprised when he saw Naruto, since the Hachibi told him when he saw him that he is the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. In honesty, Killer Bee didn't want to see Naruto yet, since he figured he'd be put as a babysitter, and decided to leave that task to Yugito, since she was also the Jinchuriki of Nibi. "You're what?" asked Naruto. "I'm Killer Bee, and like you I hold one as well, old 8-0, said Killer Bee. "How do you know I have the Kyuubi?" asked Naruto. "'Cause 8-0 said you have 9-0, answered Killer Bee. "Are you saying that you are the 8 tails, like I'm the 9? Said Naruto. Killer Bee then just scoffed when Naruto said that, which he replied, "No, I'm Killer Bee, 8-0 is my partner, like you are you and 9-0 is 9-0. Naruto was confused since he didn't get what Killer Bee was saying since he educationally speaking. Naruto was barely taught any reading, writing and math skills, so he barely understands anything complex like what he was being told. Killer Bee could see the confusion which he started to explain that he and Naruto were, in simple terms for Naruto to understand, just the jails that hold the jailers. It took Naruto a bit of time to understand that Kyuubi was Kyuubi and he was himself. Killer Bee can see that Naruto was now better, since he saw Naruto look at his reflection on the water, before splashing the image away to see the water calm down again to see his reflection again. Killer Bee guessed that Naruto first imagined himself before breaking the image to see his own reflection. Naruto thanked Killer Bee on telling him this since he barely understand on what was going on with himself. After all, Naruto is just 5 years old who was supposed to start learning how to read and write, not no complicated stuff like this. After a while of looking over the lake, Naruto asked Killer Bee on some things, like how can he be so cheerful when he has a biju inside him? Or how can he be so strong knowing this? Naturally, Killer Bee said it in a rap tone, but Naruto was able to understand some of it, which he found out that his brother, the Raikage, had faith in him along with some of his friends. Naruto was envious of him since Killer Bee has friends, which he explained why. For Naruto, the only people that ever showed him kindness was the third Hokage, Ayumi and Chuki of the ramen stand, while the third was the only one to have faith in him. All the other children just stayed away from him because he heard their parents telling them to. Killer Bee can understand that, since when he became a Jinchuriki for the Hachibi, he had the same thing, except not as severe as Naruto, since he, even though he was left all alone some of the time, no one has ever given him a beating or the stuff that Naruto went through. As they talked, Naruto actually felt better since he had someone who actually understands on what he went through. After a while, Killer Bee suggested that they go to his brother since he was pretty sure that he still wants to talk to Naruto, which he nodded. Kumo. Naruto was walking with Killer Bee towards the Raikage's office, which for the first time, he was actually looking at Kumo. He saw the civilians and ninja that were walking around. The civilians smiled nicely at him, while the shinobi looked at Killer Bee with respect and admiration. As he looked at everyone that was looking at Killer Bee, he remembered that was he wished for, to earn everyone's respect and not look down on him. It was then that he remembered that he wanted to be Hokage. Naruto stopped thinking when Killer Bee said to him that they were here. Naruto returned back to the Raikage mountain, where the Raikage's office was located at the top. It took a bit until Killer Bee led Naruto back to the top of the mountain. Once they reached the top, Naruto was once again greeted by Mabui, who was surprised to see Killer Bee with him. Killer Bee told Mabui that he brought him back here so the Raikage can figure out on what to do with Naruto. Killer Bee said his goodbye to Naruto as he had his own thing to do. Naruto then followed Mabui, who took inside the Raikage's office. The Raikage was doing some paperwork when Mabui came inside with Naruto with her. I was wondering when Naruto came back, which Mabui walked next to him and told him that Killer Bee brought him back. The Raikage nodded in understanding, since he figured that Bee must have done something since he can see that Naruto has somewhat come to terms about himself. Once Mabui finished explaining to the Raikage, she took her leave, which left Naruto and the Raikage alone. It seems now that you have somewhat comes to terms on finding out that you have the Kyuubi sealed inside you, stated the Raikage, which Naruto nodded in agreement. So, what do you plan to do now? Asked A. I don't know. After finding out about the Kyuubi, I just don't know. I could always go back to Konoha. A mentally frowned when he heard that, but decided to wait on what Naruto said next to see what his chooses first. But thinking about going back to Konoha makes me remember all the times the people were happy to see me get hurt, or plainly look at me in disgust. The truth is, if it wasn't for the old man, or Ayame and Chuki there, I won't want to be there. Finished Naruto. I nodded, since this was going good for him, whom his thoughts stopped when Naruto continued. Those three are the only people that look at me as a person, while everyone else thinks of me as just a monster, nothing more. But even so, I don't know where else to go since Konoha has been my home for all my life. Well, if you want, you can always stay here in Kumo since you don't feel like going back to Konoha, said A, which surprised Naruto on being given a chance for a fresh start in a new village. If you decided to stay, you can live here in Kumo, and if you wish to become a shinobi for Kumo, I will allow you to join. How does that sound? I asked Naruto. Naruto was thrilled since not only does he get the chance to start out new in Kumo, if he wanted to, he can also become a shinobi as well. But of course, Naruto thought about the third Hokage, Ayame and Chuki, and how sad they must be, but he remembered them saying that they wished he had a better life than the one he has now. With this, he can. Naruto looked at the Raikage before saying, yes, I'll like to stay here. Answering a question. I was pleased since he saw Naruto having a few moments of thinking it over, but was pleased with the results. Now, A has decided to let him be by himself for now, and if Naruto decided to become shinobi, he knows just the type of motivation that he knows that would get Naruto to become a strong shinobi, as well as seeing how strong the legacy that he carries really is. With that, A had Mabui come back to his office, where he instructed her to get things ready for Kumo's newest citizen, which she nodded in agreement. With that, the Raikage told Naruto to go around Kumo to see what they have, and would get him when everything was ready. Naruto nodded, which he then left to go exploring around the village. With Naruto walked outside the Raikage mountain and left to go exploring. As he walked around, he looked at how the village was so active with life. He saw men and women, shopping, talking, and enjoying themselves, along with children playing around. Naruto continued his little journey until he found a nice park. He walked inside to see that it was just as nice as Konoha, with the exception that it had a few more boulders around the area. He continued to walk around until he heard some children playing around. He was going to try and join them, but decided to wait since he doesn't want to make a bad impression. He decided to go to a nearby tree and lay next to it where he was easily visible to any of them. He waited for a while, which he watched the clouds passing by gently with the wind. Along with wait, he also thought if he can finally be able to make friends, earn respect, be someone and not just being called demon, since he remembered all the days of hardship he had to endure. In fact, even at night, he can barely sleep since he hardly had a good night's sleep, along with the added fact that sometimes, someone would come and try to hurt him while he was asleep. With the day going through, Naruto couldn't help but find peace in the environment, where he just took a nap. Later, it was mid-afternoon when Naruto woke up from his nap, which he was woken up by someone. He looked around to see no one around him. He wondered on who it was, but then heard the voice again. You know, it's cool for you to take a nap, but it's uncool to be sleeping outside where somebody can play tricks on you like that, said a girl voice. Naruto looked behind the tree that he had slept next to see a blonde-haired girl sitting behind the tree that he was next to. He walked around to get a better view of the girl. He turned to see a cute girl with pale skin and long blonde hair that reached the middle of her back that looked to be the same age as him. She had blue eyes, but darker color. The thing that caught his attention of the girl was that she had this cool, emotionless look on her face. The girl was also taking a closer look at Naruto as he was looking at her as well. As she was looking at the Naruto noticed that the girl was holding a book with her. Both of them were looking at each for a few moments, until Naruto decided to break the ice. Thanks for giving me the advice. I guess that I just got too peaceful at looking at the clouds that I checked out, said Naruto. It's cool, besides the little bit of snoring was kinda bothering me, stated the girl. Oh really? Well, sorry about that. What's your name? Asked Naruto. The girl looked at Naruto before saying, My name is Samui, and would you be cool enough to say your name? Hi Samui-chan. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, greeted Naruto. Samui acknowledged Naruto's greeting, even with the chan that Naruto added to her name, before going back to her book. Just as she was going to read her book, Naruto spoke to her again. What kind of book you are reading? Samui just sighed as she regretted now on sitting this spot where Naruto was located. Samui looked at Naruto and told him that it was a simple children's book of Kumo that she got from the library and that she was reading about it so she can improve herself. To be honest, Samui wanted a Kumo history book, but the librarian wouldn't allow her since she was still too young. Naruto asked her if she can read the book out loud because some of the stories that the third had told him before. I'm not going to tell you. If you were cool enough, how about you go and ask your parents since they can teach how to read? Answered Samui. I don't have any parents. I'm an orphan you see, stated Naruto. Then why aren't you in Kumo's orphanage since that's where orphans live? Asked Samui. It's because I just came to your village just a couple of days ago. I don't know much since this is the first time I got to see the village since I was stuck in the hospital. Answered Naruto. I see. If you want to know about Kumo or read children's books like this, then I suggest that it would be a cool idea to go to the library since you can read about Kumo from there, stated Samui. I don't know how to read. I was never taught much on how to read or write, so I was hoping if you can tell me since I can't. Embarrassed Naruto. Samui looked at Naruto, as she can see that Naruto wasn't lying. She said that it was all right, which she would read out loud to him, while he listened. Naruto quickly sit next to Samui, while making sure that she had her own personal space so he doesn't annoy her. For the first time, Naruto felt like he made a friend of sorts, which he smiled as he listened to Samui read out loud from the book. Late afternoon. The sun was just starting to set when Darui and C went looking for Naruto. The reason they were looking for Naruto was because the Raikage asked them to bring him to him, as well as since they were the only one of a few people that knows what Naruto looks like. Both Darui and C looked for a while until they found Naruto at one of the parks. They spotted Naruto sitting next to a blonde-haired girl. From what they can tell, they can see that Naruto was listening to what the girl was saying from the book. They made their way towards Naruto, which both Naruto and Samui looked up to, see the two shinobi in front of them. Samui was surprised to see two shinobi in front of her, which she was even more surprised to hear what they said. Naruto-san, the Raikage has requested that you meet him now. He says he wants to talk to you about something, said Darui. Naruto nodded and said his goodbye to Samui and said that he hopes to see her again. Raikage's office. Naruto had returned to the Raikage's office, which the Raikage was waiting for him. Once the Raikage explained to Naruto that he got Naruto an apartment that was located at the middle of the village, where it was easily accessible to reach either the civilian school or shinobi academy or the Raikage mountain, as well as saying that Naruto was very thankful, especially since the Raikage said that he has given Naruto a small allowance for him to use to buy food and things he needed to survive. Naruto was also pleased to hear that the Raikage enrolled him into the civilian school so that he can learn how to read, write, and other things, while if Naruto wanted to join the Shinobi Academy, then he would have to wait until he is 7 or 8 years old to join. Now Naruto, as you know, I already told you that you have the Kyuubi sealed inside you, which Naruto nodded. With that, I'll be going to tell you that I'm going to tell the rest of my shinobi about it, stated the Raikage. Naruto started to get worried, but then calmed down when the Raikage continued to explain. Don't worry, I'll be going to tell them that to only tell current shinobi in Kumo, but never to any civilians. If anyone has the right to tell them, it should be you since it is your secret. Understand? Naruto nodded in agreement, as well as being relieved to know that his secret remains a secret. With that, excused Naruto to go check out his new apartment and to be ready to begin his new life in Kumo. Konoha. Currently, it was a bright and sunny day for everyone. The citizens were busy smiling and living out their lives in peace, while the shinobi continued to train and grow strong in order to protect their home. For the third Hokage, it was a day for him to continue to get ready for the upcoming event for Konoha, the Genin graduation exam. The Hokage was looking over the soon-to-be Genin graduates. One of them was the last and heir of Uchiha clan, Sasuke Uchiha. As he thought about Sasuke, he couldn't help but think about Naruto, since if it wasn't for the civilians as well as the irresponsibility of some of his shinobi, Naruto would have become a shinobi for Konoha as well. As he thought about Naruto, he couldn't help on what happened over the past 8 years. With Naruto's death, the third remembered how happy the villagers were to know that the demon is dead. Of course he punished the Anbu that was supposed to have protected Naruto, while he also heard Danzo also discipline his root agent that was also had to keep an eye on him as well. After Naruto's death, the next thing to happen was Kumo's peace agreement, which went well without a hitch. With the peace treaty, Konoha didn't have to worry much about Kumo, which he and the elders had to wonder on since making the arrangement was a simple thing, which Kumo made the agreements even for both Konoha and themselves. The final thing to happen was the Uchiha clan massacre, which Sasuke's older brother, Itachi Uchiha, killed every last member, from his father, mother to his cousins. Everyone in the Uchiha clan was killed except his little brother, Sasuke. With the Uchiha clan lost, the civilians thought that Sasuke could resurrect the Uchiha clan to glory and treated him special since he was an Uchiha. With that, the third looked at the portfolio on the final genin that could be graduating this year. The potential genin's name was Ko and he was the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi. Sarutobi remembered the conversation that he had with the elders, which all three of them agreed that they needed to get another Jinchuriki since they lost Naruto. Sarutobi remembered that day pretty well. Flashback. The third had walked into his office where he was greeted by the shinobi elders. They asked where he was, which he told them that he went to pay a visit to the fourth Hokage and his family grave. After explaining, the elders talked to Hiruzen about the loss of military might, the Kyuubi. They discussed the issue for a bit, which Danzo told the third that he had a plan to have another Biju in Konoha. The third was against it, but the other two elders, Homura and Kaharu, wanted to know what Danzo planned. Now, as you all know, Kiri is under civil war from the bloodline purging, right? Said Danzo, which they nodded. During that time, I overheard of a rumor, which I sent a few shinobi to investigate the matter, which was verified. The Yondaime Mizukage was killed, but not before he released the Sanbi free from his seal right before he was killed. As of now, Kiri's civil war is almost over, but before then, we can send a team of elite sealers to capture the Sanbi and sealed it inside another child. Finished Danzo. Homura and Kaharu were somewhat pleased about the idea, but Sarutobi was having mixed feelings since capture the Sanbi could cause them to lose a lot of manpower, which Konoha was still recovering from. But the elders agreed with the idea and continued to work on the third until he agreed, which he did. Of course, for safety and secrecy, the third said that no one besides the people who are going to do this operation would know of it, since the third doesn't want a repeat like with Naruto, which the elders agreed on it. End flashback. It took about a month to complete the mission, which some of the third skilled Anbu sealers as well as some of Danzo's own men to find and captured the Sanbi in secret. Of course, this cost some of their men lives since capturing the Sanbi was dangerous. With the Sanbi in Konoha's position now, Danzo had picked a boy from his root organization that he trained. The boy's name was Ko, who had average skills and determination, but still a perfect candidate for containing the Sanbi since he had a strong chakra network. Once the Sanbi was sealed, Danzo had the boy trained in his root program to control the Biju within him, but of course, Sarutobi knew that Danzo wanted to control the boy for his own use just like he hoped he can do with Naruto, but he stopped Danzo by putting the boy in a shinobi academy, making sure that he can live a normal life since he wanted to make sure that Danzo doesn't corrupt him any more than he did. As he thought about Ko, he remembered on what happened when he explained to Jiraiya about Naruto death. When he told Jiraiya about Naruto, he was completely saddened and went into despair. He knew that Jiraiya had planned to train the boy once he became a genin, like he did with Naruto's father, the Yondaime Hokage. It went on for months until Jiraiya got himself back to normal, but still the third can see that Jiraiya was now carrying an even heavier amount of guilt and regret for failing his former student and friend, along with failing Naruto as his godfather. Sarutobi's thoughts were interrupted when someone entered his door. He saw Homura and Kaharu walking into his office, which they came to talk about the upcoming genin exams, which they wondered on which possible children would be teamed up together. He went to discuss the matter with them. While unknown to him or anyone for that matter, the soul that was thought to be dead was also preparing for his own genin exam. In Kumo, like Konoha, everyone was busy with what they were doing. The civilians were working hard and happily for their families, while the shinobi continued to train hard when they are needed to protect their village. For one villager, it was an important day for him. He was young upcoming genin, who has gotten a lot of attention around Kumo, one who is golden for Rookie of the Year in Kumo. He was easily recognized since he had blonde spiky hair, blue cerulean eyes, but the thing that got people to notice him was his whisker marks on both his cheeks with a serious look on his face. He was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the future Godime Raikage of Kumo. The reason he has a serious face, beside his usual friendly smiling one, was because he won the deal he made with the Raikage when he first wanted to become a shinobi. Flashback. A 7-year-old Naruto was currently inside the Raikage's office asking that he wants to become a shinobi for Kumo. I was curious about it, since from the reports of his Anbu that secretly watched Naruto for the past 2 years, he was living a normal, happy life as a civilian. Why do you want to become a shinobi, Naruto? What's your reason? Question A. Naruto thought about it for a minute since he had a lot of time thinking it over, and he wanted to say his feelings out loud to him. I want to become a shinobi because of you, but mostly because of what B-san and Yugito Nichan, replied Naruto. I looked at Naruto, as he explained on why he wanted to become a ninja. He said that even though he was living a happy life now, with friends thanks to him, but he saw how people looked at how strong A was, but mostly on how B was so confident even when he was the Jinchuriki like him. Over the few years, Naruto had gotten along with B as role model, since like him, B had suffered as well. While he later met Yugito, which he found out that she was the Jinchuriki of Nibi no Bakeneko. Yugito had to work really hard as a shinobi since she wanted to prove that she was strong enough to use her power as a Jinchuriki to help the people she cared for. Naruto had witnessed from them the kind of confidence they had and care for the village they called home, which in return, they were respected and were beloved by others as heroes. Naruto wanted to do the same since this village gave him things that Konoha didn't, like kindness and friendship. In fact, he told some of his friends that he was like Yugito and B and that he was the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi, which many had their own opinion from cool to scared, which a few stopped being his friend and gave a cold shoulder. When I heard this, he can tell from the look on Naruto's eyes that he was serious and determined to become strong and protect the village with his life if he needed to. As he looked at Naruto, he had an idea pop into his head. From the look on his face, he is telling the truth. I guess hanging out with B and Yugito did a lot of good for him, as well as seeing me in command. With his mindset, he can become an excellent shinobi like his father. That's it. If I make a deal with him that would motivate him, then I can see how strong the bloodline of the heir and final known member of the Namikaze Uzumaki clan. Thought A. Alright then Naruto, you can go join the academy, said A, which Naruto smiled about it, but then stopped when A spoke up again. With that being said, how about we make a little wager on it? Smirk A. Wager. What kind of wager? Confused Naruto. How about this? If you have all excellent grades from here to graduation and graduate as Rookie of the Year, I will tell you on who were your parents, said A. Naruto was shocked. As of right now, the Raikage was the one person right now, beside the third Hokage, to know on who his parents are, and he was willing to tell him about it. But before he can ask on why he can't tell him now, A spoke again. If you are wondering on why I just don't tell you on who they are, is because you are still young and may take things the wrong way. With this, you'll mature on and learn things, as well as be more prepared to know on who your mother and father are. Plus, I know for a fact that your father was an honorable man, who even I respected, and I feel that I would at least give him some respect and tell his son about him when he was ready, which I believe is when you become a shinobi. So what do you say? Do you agree on the wager? Asked A. Naruto nodded in acceptance since the Raikage was only thinking on what's best for him, but of course the Raikage also said along with the game, if Naruto doesn't graduate as Rookie of the Year, he wouldn't be told on who his parents are. End flashback. Over the next 4 years, Naruto has studied and trained harder than anyone else in the Ninja Academy, so he can finally find out on who where his parents are. While even though he has trained harder than anyone else, he also learned to enjoy life as Killer Bee while Yugito helped him, giving some valuable advice. Why have power when you don't have a reason to use it for? So over the years, Naruto had made friends with his classmates when he wasn't studying or training. He would hang out and enjoy life like any other kid. But now, he couldn't help but think on what he learned from the Raikage. To know that the Yondaime Hokage, the one that sealed the Kyuubi inside him, was his own father was stunning to him. As well as to know that his own mother was the former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko. As he learned on his parents' identity, he wondered on what happened to them since he guessed that they died on the day he was born. Even though he thought about it, he had to put that aside from his mind for now, since he had his Genin final exam to pass, which he would then become a shinobi for Kumo and his next step on becoming the next Raikage. Kumo's Academy. In the classroom, there were students walking in and having some fun or preparing for the genin exam that they were going to do. As they were chatting around with friends or preparing on what to expect for genin exam, the most of the girls in the room just noticed the heart throb of their class walk-in. Walking in was Naruto, who for past 4 years in the academy, has grown not only as a shinobi but also as person. Naruto had a cheerful, friendly and fun attitude that got along pretty well with everyone, but that was only when he wasn't serious or on guard for anything. When Naruto was serious, he was a completely different person, which all the academy students know, which he turns from a fun guy into a serious, focus, strong shinobi that the girls like, plus the clothing he was wearing also highlight as well. Naruto has grown from the 5-year-old child that was too scared to sleep at night, into a strong 12-year-old. He was fairly tall for someone his age. He was 4 feet 9 featuring tall. He wore a dark, baggy cargo pants that had compact pockets on its sides with steel-tip boots. He wore a sleeveless fishnet shirt underneath his sleeveless dark green vest. He also was wearing black fingerless gloves with a flat metal piece on the back of his hands while also having both his forearms bandaged up from the wrist to the elbow. On his back he had one of a few weapons that made everyone know how strong he is. On his back, he had a durable bow, similar to Hawkeye in the Avengers without the laser sights, but no arrows. The reason why he doesn't have any arrows behind his back is because he has his arrows on his left forearm, sealed inside waiting to be unsealed, which he had a total of 20 arrows in 2 seals, which was below another the main seal where he had his kunai 10. On his right forearm, he had 3 more seals on him that had another pair of kunai 10, with 2 seals that hold pairs of shuriken 10 each. Of course the students in the room knew that the bow was the only visible weapon since Naruto had a few more hidden things and abilities that he trained hard to master that gave him the nickname from his peers, the Yellow Blade. As Naruto entered the classroom, he made his way to his seat near his good friend Omoi. Naruto and Omoi had a pretty good relationship, which many believe that they were best friends. Of course, many girls had asked or bribed Omoi into helping them get Naruto to be their boyfriend, but to no avail. Omoi was a tall, bit smaller than Naruto, 4 feet 6 featuring wearing standard shinobi clothing, black pants, shinobi sandals, and brown shirt that was comfortable but reliable in the field, while also wearing a katana as well as having a weapons pouch on his waist. He had a dull face that would turn serious when he starts overthinking on things that could get him in trouble, or leading up to trouble, which Naruto finds it funny sometimes on the fact that they are beyond reason. Omoi saw Naruto take his seat next to him and tried to start a conversation with him, but saw that Naruto had a serious face on him, which he can tell that Naruto had something important in his mind. As Omoi looked at him, while Naruto's fan club looked at Naruto's serious face, Naruto was thinking about his parents, the Yondaime Hokage and the previous Jinchuriki of Kyuubi, while also thinking what he has gone through in Konoha, then here in Kumo. With his parents, he had so many questions since his father being the Yondaime Hokage, while his mother was the former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. Even though he has so many questions on finding out that his hero he admired back in Konoha was his father that sealed Kyuubi in him, while wondering on what happened to his mother. He also thought on how the old man, the third Hokage, had lied to him in his face since he asked several times on who his parents are and he said he doesn't know or some other excuse. Before he can even start thinking about them, he decided to put it at the back of his head for now since he has genin test to pass right now. Remembering the material for the exam also got him remembering on how he first started school when he was 5, just starting to learn on how to read, write, and math. Naruto was only 5 when he started to go to civilian school in order to learn. At the beginning, he was having hard time learning since he wasn't taught much academic stuff and the curriculum required him to know this. But thanks to some students he made friends with as well as some helpful shinobi teachers that understood his problem, he was able to learn how to read, write and do mathematics to the standard requirement. Of course, that was only the requirement. During his own time, he studied just any regular kid his age would do, while having fun with his friends after school and such. It wasn't until he joined Kumo's Shinobi Academy as well as the bet he made with it that he completely applied himself in his studies, while also learning to enjoy hanging out with his friends. During his time in the academy, he found that he had a real knack on Fuinjutsu, art of seals. It all started when he was in his third year, when the academy teachers started teaching them the areas of ninjutsu. Flashback. It was early afternoon. The entire class had just finished with their lunch break and was now ready to go on with class. Everyone was relieved to end their class of outside taijutsu and were excited to finally start learning the awaited subject that everyone wanted to do, ninjutsu. Class was now midway, when the teachers started to explain on ninjutsu, which everyone had the look of joy since many wanted to learn how to do cool ninjutsu. Of course the instructors saw the looks, which they decided to drop the ball on them, which they said that they will learn ninjutsu in their final year, not this year. This got the class down when the instructors told them that they were going to explain on the different types of ninjutsu. Alright class, getting the class attention, who can tell me the areas of ninjutsu? Many wondered on what it could be, where many didn't know what were it, but a few students who studied on it answer it. The answers in ninjutsu were genjutsu, illusion, ninpo and elemental just you, kinjutsu, forbidden techniques, and finally fuinjutsu, the art of seals and sealing. Alright now class, as for those of you who become shinobi, these are the techniques that many of you would know. Now, I'll start with the first part, genjutsu. One by one, the instructor explained as simply as she can on what each ninjutsu does. Many were surprised to know the types of ninjutsu that require chakra, such as genjutsu can help put people in an illusion world, or help hide you from anyone. Ninpo and elemental jutsu can be used in anything, from multiplying a single shuriken into dozens of shuriken, while the elemental styles can use from any of the 5 known elements: wind, lightning, water, earth, and fire. Kinjutsu or forbidden arts, where the caster would have to give up something, whether it could do extreme physical damage to using your soul or other souls as payment for dangerous form. When the teacher started to explain on fuinjutsu. Alright, now we're in the final part of ninjutsu, which is fuinjutsu, the art of seals, sealing. Now, who can tell me on some of the benefits on learning fuinjutsu? Asked the teacher. Many were thinking about it, but Naruto raised his hand to answer. The teacher acknowledges him. Alright Uzumaki-san, what are the benefits of fuinjutsu? Well, fuinjutsu can be used in a few ways that I can think of. One way is that you can use it to seal equipment, such as rope, shinobi wire, or any sort of weapons into a simple scroll, which can lessen the load a person carries. Another is that you can protect any type of important documents or things into a special type of seal which would only allow the caster or the person to open. And finally, the last thing I can think of is that it can be used to help seal off a person chakra with a specific type of seal. Answered Naruto. Many were impressed on how Naruto knew what to answer, which the teacher happy smiled and said that he was right on a few of the things he said. Once the teacher explained to the class about it was then that class was going to end for the day. The professor then explained to them on their homework for the night. End flashback. It was during the lesson of fuinjutsu that he started getting interested in it. After he completed his homework, which in all he was right, but it was the fuinjutsu part of the homework that he excelled the most in. He then focused his time in going to the library whenever he had enough free time to see books and scroll, whichever Kumo had, on learning fuinjutsu. Reading on fuinjutsu, which confused more than most people but came naturally to him like he was born to know fuinjutsu. He practices it until he had one conversation with Yugito. Flashback. Yugito was walking into a dango shop to have a sweet snack, when she spotted a 11-year-old Naruto sitting at a bench nearby. After she got her order, she went to him to see him reading a scroll of sealing from Kumo's shinobi library. Hey Naru-chan, is that a scroll of fuinjutsu? Asked Yugito. Naruto looked up to see Yugito, which he nodded. Hi Yugito-ne. Why are you reading a scroll on fuinjutsu? Questioned Yugito. Naruto took a moment to pause this since he wanted to be very clear to Yugito. After a few moments, he said, "Well, ever since we started to learn on what ninjutsu is and how fuinjutsu works, I've grown a lot of interest. Knowing on how, in the right order and style, you can do almost anything with it." Yugito can understand it since she always wanted to learn on how to use fuinjutsu, but given how difficult to learn it, as well as Kumo not having any real seal masters which the best they have were above mid-average in the art, she had to give it up. It was then Yugito's thoughts stopped when she heard Naruto say, "Given on how I like reading Fuin and wanted to learn it, along with the fact that Kumo's doesn't have a real seal master, I'm going to become a Kumo's greatest seal master, along with being the next Raikage." End flashback. With that, Naruto worked hard and with only a few tips from the teachers and relying solely on scroll and books on fuinjutsu, he was able to get a good grasp on it that he was on Chunin LV Sealer. His thoughts ended when he heard the academy teacher coming in and telling them that they are going to start now. With that, Naruto's attention had stopped from his thoughts about the past and focus on the here and now. Raikage's office. As Naruto was busy with Genin exam, A was focusing on the files before him. He was currently looking over the files on quite possibly on his future Genin teams. He read each academy student's files, until he came up to the final bits, which were the files that were the most interesting. One was the possible Kunoichi of the year, while the second was golden for Rookie of the Year, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. As he read Naruto stats, he couldn't believe on how much his bet motivated him to get to a level where he can be on even playing field with mid-LV Chunin, even though he has yet to start learning the basic Charka control exercises yet. In fact, A has asked on a record of a student who had the same LV as Naruto in the academy, which he was surprised to know that it has been over 15 years since a prodigy like Naruto has been around. He couldn't help but smile, since even though he never had planned to know that Naruto is seeking his position when he grows up, he couldn't help but smile about since Naruto has proven that he is very capable and loyalty to his friends. Things around the elemental nations are going to become very interesting. A suddenly thought as he decided on who would be on each team. Academy. It has been over an hour since the test began. For the first half hour of class, the instructor explained on what was going to be on the test, which many had their own worries and such. For others, they were confident that all the studying and practice they did was more than enough. Once the explanation was done, the written test was begun, which many were having difficulty in. Naruto was completely bored in taking the test since he knew all the answers from the start, where he looked like he was just dribbling around his paper with a bored look. He checked around to see that his friend Omoi and his best friend, Samui, were doing alright. Naruto couldn't believe on how much Samui has changed over the years. She was now 4 feet 3 feet tall and had cut her long straight blonde hair for a shorter version just around her chin. She wore a gray revealing mini skirt with a tight, white, short-sleeve tank shirt over a sleeveless fishnet shirt. She also carried her weapons and supplies on her utility belt, while also have her katana strapped behind her back. Samui's body were already started to show signs of her becoming more womanly, as the stage for her started to develop and her body started be curvier. With Omoi, he can tell that he was having one of his episodes on where he was thinking of the consequences of not writing the right answer, while he saw that Samui was doing great. Over the years, since they've first met, both Naruto and Samui had grown close, well as close as Kumo's most famous, Ice Queen, can get. Naruto can remember on when he and Samui met again in the Shinobi Academy. Flashback. Naruto was only 8 years old when he started at the academy. He was in class sitting around enjoying on seeing all the new faces around him. Earlier, he was outside the entrance of the academy, where he saw the Raikage give a small speech for all of the students who will or will not become Kumo's future shinobi. As he was sitting down looking at the new faces, one in particular stood out. On his left side, he saw a pale girl with dark blue eyes and long blonde hair, with an emotionless expression on her face. When he looked at her, he saw her looking back at him. They both looked at each other for a moment, before the girl looked annoyed and turned away from him. Naruto continued to look at the girl whom he decided to try and talk to her since he felt like he knows her. Before he could ask, the shinobi instructors came into the class and started things off. They explained on what was going to be necessary for being a shinobi. They then got everyone in the class to introduce themselves from where they were sitting. As the class went down, it came down to Naruto's turn, whose mind was still on the girl. "Hey, you!" Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when the instructor yelled at him, "Stop spacing out and introduce yourself." Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, and my dream is to become the next Raikage of Kumo," said Naruto. Once he was done, the next kid went on until it made it to the girl, who she introduces herself. "Hello, my name is Samui. I wanted to be a strong and cool kunoichi." When a lot of the boys saw Samui for the first time, they couldn't help but think on how cute she looks, even with the emotionless look on her face. It was then that Naruto remembered on who she was. He remembered that it was the girl he sort of made friends with back when he first walked around Kumo. During lunch break, Naruto quickly went to find her, which he did sitting all alone at the back of the school, where many of the other children don't come around. He calmly walked up to her. As he got close enough, Samui spoke. "What do you want? It's uncool for someone to just look at them all day and then finding me like this." "Are you a stalker?" asked Samui. "No, I'm no stalker, especially to the girl I first met when I first came into Kumo 3 years ago," answered Naruto. Samui looked at Naruto, and then she remembered seeing a blonde spiky hair boy with blue cerulean eyes and 3 whisker marks on both his cheeks. End flashback. After reuniting after 3 years, both Naruto and Samui had an alright relationship. For Naruto, he treated her like a friend, instead as a goddess that the other boys always do. Samui treated Naruto like everyone else in the academy, coldly. But it wasn't until he beat her in taijutsu training in the academy that she acknowledges him as her equal. Over the years after their battle, both Naruto and Samui relationship had increased steadily. They would always hang out with each other, while also helping each other out. Naruto helped Samui out with a lot of stuff that she wanted help in, such as taijutsu and ninjutsu. While Samui helped Naruto out by when he asked her to help him. Their relationship was so close to each other, that many people thought they were dating, even though they were kids, but it wasn't true, well at least half the time. Naruto treated Samui like a true kunoichi, like Samui did the same with Naruto. But sometimes Samui always got an annoying feeling whenever she saw one of Naruto's fangirls tried to get him on a date or asking him to be their boyfriend. Later. It's been a few hours since the written exam, which after the test the students were given an hour off for them to have lunch or to loosen themselves up from the written portion, where they can also get ready for the physical part of the exam. Once everyone had finished their break, the students came back to the academy where they waited outside the academy's training area for students. Naruto was currently with Samui, along with Omoi, where they waited for the instructors to come out. As they waited, a lot of the girls who were in Naruto's fan club wanted to go and confess or asked him out on a date, but were hesitant since they saw that Samui was nearby him. Now, normally it wouldn't be a problem, but it was just that Samui was the strongest kunoichi in class and best student next to Naruto. The instructors came out once everyone in class had arrived. They began to test out everyone's shuriken and kunai skills. Everyone scored average or above average, where some actually scored high. Only Naruto and Samui scored perfect scores. For extra credit, they were allowed to use any other form of throwing weapon which only a few did. With Naruto, he used his bow. Naruto went to the target range, where he asked for moving targets, which the instructors did. The instructors put 4 moving targets, 2 of a distance of 500 yards and 2 at 1,000 yards away. Naruto unsealed his arrows and shot which he hit dead center at the 2,500 yards ones, while the two 1,000 yards ones got one bullseye and almost onto dead center. Next came up was the taijutsu exam, which many were thrilled and worried about. One by one, each student went against each other, while the instructors watched to see the level of each student possessed. Naruto saw Omoi go up and won his match, although he saw Omoi was having some difficult, which he can understand since Omoi was more on kenjutsu than taijutsu. After a little while, Samui went up to win her match as well, which she finished in a fast pace. Finally came Naruto's turn, which was unfortunate for his opponent since he was beaten in less than 10 seconds. Finally came up the ninjutsu test, which everyone was succeeding or failing on the 3 known jutsu that all genin needed to know: transformation, substitution, and clone jutsu. When Naruto's turn came up, he went into a different room, where the test was being taken. Naruto did both the transformation and substitution jutsu perfectly. When the Bunshin jutsu came up, he would have been worried, but thanks to Killer Bee, he was confident about it. Flashback. Naruto was alone, looking over a lake that he sometimes to train on his simple ninjutsu. Currently, he was trying everything he can on doing a simple clone, which wasn't going so good. Naruto was about to call a day, when he looked behind him to see Killer Bee. Bee-sama, surprised Naruto. "Hey Naruto, what's with the look? It doesn't match your attitude," asked Bee. "I've been trying to perfect the Bunshin no Jutsu, but I can't seem to do it," an annoyed Naruto. It was then that Killer Bee told him about his problem, since he can understand it too well. He explained about how his Biju was giving him an extra boost of power where it made it difficult to use little amount of chakra. Killer Bee decided to teach Naruto a different Bunshin jutsu that would allow him to learn it. End flashback. Naruto created a lightning clone jutsu, where Naruto created a lightning clone. With that, Naruto had passed the academy and graduated from it as well. Once the exam was over, everyone was free for the next hour for them to relax, while the instructors finish up grading up the final portions. Later, final break has ended, where all the students return to their classroom for the last time. The grades were given out, where Naruto was given the Rookie of the Year title, and Samui was given the Kunoichi of the Year. With that being said and done, the class was dismissed. For those who graduated, they would return in 3 days' time for team placements. Everyone went outside, where many parents were out waiting to congratulate or comfort their children on who passed or failed. Naruto walked away from the academy and headed back home to his apartment, since now, he can focus his feelings of finding out that his father was the Yondaime Hokage and his mother being the last Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. Before Naruto could even get about 50 meters away from the academy, Omoi came walking up to him. "Hey Naruto, yo bro, what's wrong with you? You seem spaced out about something," Omoi asked out of concern. Naruto shook his head. "Nothing is wrong, I just got a lot on my mind right now." "On what?" curious Omoi. "I spoke to the Raikage earlier today, before going to class, and told me something personal. I won't go into details, but, right now, I just need some time to be by myself," answered Naruto. "Alright then, but before you do, I believe we should go and eat something first. If you're going to be thinking for a while, I suggest you do it with a full stomach so you won't be distracted by anything," said Omoi. Naruto was about to decline until Omoi went on one of his scenario episodes, "But if you eat too much, you might get a stomach ache, which you would then be thinking on how to relax it, or if you don't." Naruto just sighed at Omoi antics, but decided to go and eat since he was going to be thinking about his parents for a while. Once Naruto got Omoi to calm down from his antics, both of them were about to walk off, when Naruto noticed Samui, being somewhat harassed from her male fan club members on going on date with one of them as a celebration. Before Samui can say drop dead, they heard Naruto calling out to Samui. "Oi, Samui-chan, Omoi and I are going to get something to eat. Want to come along?" "Hi, that's a cool idea, I'll join you both," answered Samui. The guys were disappointed since Naruto had gotten their goddess to go with him. Samui walked along with Naruto and Omoi behind them, since he had seen the signs that both of them had some feelings for each other, even though he knew that Naruto had a thick head about women and didn't understand their feelings that well, while Samui stubbornly refused to let her feelings out to anyone, even with her emotionless appearance. As Omoi looked at them from their backs, both Naruto and Samui were having their own conversation. So Samui-chan, congrats on being this year's Kunoichi of the year. I know that you deserve it for all the effort you put into it, said Naruto. Thanks you Naruto-san, but I have to admit that it was cool of you to help me when I asked for your help, since that was part of the reason I did so well, replied Samui. What are you going to do from here on out? What kind of people you want be in a team with? Asked Naruto. I would prefer a team where we get the job done, and avoid having someone who isn't up to par with me since I prefer not to babysit anyone during a mission, since it would be uncool to have to focus not only on the mission but also your teammate, answered Samui. Yeah, I have to agree on that too, replied Naruto. Both of them continued a conversation with each other with Omoi jumped in to talk with them. They all went to a barbecue restaurant for their celebration. As they ate, Samui noticed that Naruto had other things on his mind since even though they were having an alright time, she saw that Naruto had other things in his mind.